So I was on the third round of interviews with Accenture. I think I had my second interview the day before we launched the site, and all I talked about the whole interview was our ranking system we were building, which I'm sure they loved. Um, but I never got a call back for the third interview, and just thinking how that might have gone differently had I gotten that job, I probably would have moved out of Nashville and become a consultant slave. No offense to consultants out there, but
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and I designed this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's about somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we talked to Adam Small, who started his career in the online poker space and has now joined the online betting and online casino opportunities. Let's go ahead and jump into our conversation with him now. Enjoy. Hey guys, it's me, Tros, with the How I Got Here podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by Adam Small, who's had his toes dipped in many different pools within the fantasy sports and sports betting space for, I don't even not sure how long, but we're about to find out. Adam, for people that may not know you by name or by face, within like a 10 to 15 second short snippet, kind of give a high level overview of where you are right now in 2025.
yeah, I'm running a media company called Third Planet. We run the site ingame.com, and I think a lot of people have been noticing the last few months. And we run a number of properties that mostly just cover business news. We're kind of like a Bloomberg for the gaming industry.
All right, simple and sweet. I like starting off our podcast with going as far back in your memory as your memory allows, the very, very first thing you ever wanted to do or be or whatever, and kind of roughly what age were you when that epiphany happened?
Yeah, that's good. That's good starting point for this. So I would say when I was in high school is what I remember. I mean, everybody when they're little says I want to be, a pilot or a baseball player, or, whatever, like something that is very clearly definable to a kid. But when I was in high school, I started studying computer science. I think it was my sophomore year in high school. I took my first C++ class, and part of it was just we just had this really terrific teacher at my high school, which I was very fortunate for. But it all made sense to me right away. Programming, it was a language that made sense to me. I could read, people would print out their programs back then, and someone would print out a 10-page long program and a whole bunch of stuff in there that I had never seen, but I'd read through it and I was fascinated with understanding why things were set up the way they were. I loved annotating my code. I loved organizing it, like doing all the tabs, like making it real neat and tidy and clean. And I got it into my head that that was what I wanted to do was be a software engineer, be a computer scientist. And I ended up going to Vanderbilt and studying computer science and math there. And then I proceeded to graduate from college and never do any of that stuff again. But that was where it all started.
So when you had the first idea of like, okay, I really like what I'm doing here. I like this class. I think I want to go to school for this. Out, I understand the computer science engineering side of it, but did you have a more refined or specific idea of once I go, if I go to college for this, this is exactly what I want to do with that degree? Was there anything shaping early on, whether it was right before or right before you finished high school or as you're stepping into Vanderbilt?
I don't think it was like a specific industry that I was targeting. I think I was definitely interested in gaming in general, like if I could have gotten into game development of some kind, but I didn't have a really clear eye about that. I mostly just knew I liked creating code and I loved making the finished product work. There's something very satisfying about after all the trial and error and debugging and everything that your program actually does what it's supposed to do. It's a very good feeling to create something that like tangibly works. And I was excited to go forward and do that. And in that sense, I guess I did do some of that again, even if I wasn't the one writing code later on, because we did, go through that process of launching websites that is often very cumbersome and full of a lot of mistakes and regrettable moments. But then you get there.
So the initial idea of okay, how do I implement my fascination for writing code and the computer science engineering side of thing into gaming, when did that shift away? Whether it was at some point during Vanderbilt or when you left, where it was like, okay, this is no longer where I see myself going. with this degree or with this industry in general?
I was like almost kind of like Forrest Gump for a couple of years. I think I stumbled around not knowing exactly where I was going and ended up landing in a really fortuitous position. I was living with a guy named Cal Spears, who we were talking about off camera a few minutes ago. He and I were college classmates, and we were really into poker, playing late into the night often, with our other roommate and other friends as well. And another Vanderbilt friend, Riley Bryant, and the two of us started working on this project in poker that was a website that was designed to sort of identify and celebritize and rank online poker players. And this is in 2004. Online poker was this booming, it was a year after Moneymaker had won the World Series. Online poker was this big thing. There were all kinds of operators, but I mean, even just things like you're playing on a site like Ultimate Bet was a big one at the time, or Poker Stars. I think it wasn't apparent to the average player even where that site was run out of, if you thought of that at all. It wasn't apparent, if they were licensed or not. It wasn't apparent at all who you were playing against when you were on there, which is often people from all over the world. And you're really just looking at a screen name and you're seeing chips fly around the screen. And we were very interested. There were all these players on. I mentioned Ultimate Bet because they actually had a program that looked a lot like AOL Instant Messenger, if you remember that. But it was called Ultimate Buddy, and you could follow players on there. So you had this kind of separate screen running where you were watching the players that you had decided to follow when they were online. You could see what tables they were at and click through and watch them. And there would be these players that would have 1,000, 2,000 people watching them at a time when they're playing. And we were fascinated with this. And most of the people watching had no idea who the player was in real life. It was just a screen name to them. It was Spirit Rock or Poker Ho or West Texas Man, all these crazy names. And we were like, we need to, create a resource around this. So it really started with just Cal and me talking about a lot, and Riley is a developer and had a full-time job doing that and kind of started working on building it out for us. I did most of the work around identifying the actual players and connecting with them, just kind of the networking aspect of that whole business. And Riley was a thousand times better developer than me, and I would have never even been helpful to him. So I just kind of never got involved on that side, and just focused on the people aspect, and the content side, figuring out what it was that we were going to actually present to the people that came to our site, and how we were going to get people to our site. Because a big part of that networking as well was just kind of hyping up the site before we ever launched it, getting people excited about it so that when we launched, we had a lot of traffic kind of right off the bat. And so that was kind of how I ended up pivoting into that type of role. And just to back up a few months, I'd actually been in grad school, was going to get a master's in computer science, and I lost my scholarship in the summer of 2004. Might be the first time I've said that on a podcast, and I dropped out. I didn't really want to pay another, $30,000 for the next year of school or whatever that was going to cost, which I also didn't have. And so I dropped out and kind of wasn't doing much else. So I really just poured myself into both playing poker and being around that business all the time. And I caught a lucky break in the middle of all this. I won a trip to Aruba. They had a World Poker Tour event down there, and I won a tournament online to get into it, and got to go down there and meet just tons of players. And that really boosted, just jump started my ability to actually be someone that people would talk to and listen to, and that they sort of trusted to represent them well, and so on.
So, in for this particular trip in Aruba, did you how far I guess before you actually flew to Aruba was this project where it was a point because I'm thinking of I just see you getting off the plane wearing like branded sneakers, branded shirt, branded hat, like everything on
No.
brand. Like download this app, it'll rank you.
Yeah, this is before apps, but yeah, I
Well,
mean
yeah,
this
yeah.
is this is 2004. We no, I it was not like that. I had, like, we were already working on it. We were well into the development process, and had a lot of ideas about what we were going to do that I think looked reasonably similar to what the final product actually was. But I got down there, I had no idea what to expect. I think that the same way people lionize other celebrities, we had all kind of lionized these big online poker players. Like, I wonder if these guys will even talk to us or whatever. And it turns out, they were all just like degens, like playing craps at night and all this kind of stuff. And so it was very easy to connect with them and get to know them. And I think most of them, not all, but most were pretty excited that someone actually cared about what they were doing and was interested in getting to know more about them. So we were able to connect quite a bit, but no one knew what Pocket Fives was. And I actually remember I have this sort of like funny anecdote from down there. I don't know if you've been around poker at all, but there was a huge magazine called Bluff Magazine for a long time that was run out of Atlanta. And when I was down there, Bluff had not yet launched and Pocket Fives had not yet launched, but I met a couple of the people that ended up being instrumental in Bluff on that same trip. And we all, eventually kind of had, I guess, somewhat parallel paths up that ecosystem to being relevant, entities within the sort of poker media. Um, but yeah, it was just it was an interesting time. And I was 23. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I really just had kind of set out to meet people, and that was it.
For the initial concept of Pocket Fives, was it you reaching out to these online players for them to kind of either stamp of approval on a bio or whatever you create for them? Was it them to create their own online profile personality, or did you just pull? Were you able to get into the API of these sites and be like, okay, this player has played in this many things. This is their win loss. This is how all of those things. Like, how did that? What was the original idea? I guess.
So the first thing you said was kind of the original, and then the second thing you said was what it eventually morphed into. So yeah, I mean, I think to have any legitimacy for a rankings product, you've got to have data. And we did not have that to begin. So the first iteration of Pocket Fives, which I would say lasted about a year and a half from launch, was literally just me saying these are the top 50, or it became 75 players. And I would kind of manually watch results in the biggest tournaments each week and just take notes on players I noticed doing well or player names I knew that had placed on final tables. It was very shoddy early on. And then on top of that, and this includes prior to launching the site at all, I took a bunch of calls with players that we sort of believed were the top players, players that we thought were at least somewhere around the top 10 overall online. This was just for tournaments. And we would get on the phone with them and I'd say, look, this is kind of like the top 50 that I have in my mind. What do you think? And I just kind of take notes from them. And of course, everyone has their own self-serving opinions, but also they had other things to say that we could use as data points to try to figure it out. So we did try to be meticulous and serious about the process of ranking, but we didn't really have the tools to make what I would really think of now as a legitimate ranking system. We did our best, but it's still caught fire when we put it live. Mostly, I think because no one else had tried to do anything at all. And we were at least coming out and saying, hey, like we're paying a lot of attention to this space. These are the people we think are legit. I think we were very honest about what we did do and what we didn't do and kind of what our intentions were with it. And what I found, much to our delight, I would say, is that a lot of players just started reaching out to us. We started getting emails from the top online poker players or from other players that we didn't even know or that knew some of the other ranked players. And sometimes there were people yelling at us, like, why didn't you include this guy? Or why did you have this guy so high? Sometimes it was like, hey, I don't know if you realize that this name on Poker Stars is this name on Party Poker, is this name on Ultimate Bet. They started giving us info that made it easier for us to sort of track the whole body of work for players. And over time, we pieced together a lot more useful information. And then, so we launched in January of '05, and by early 2006, we were starting to get data feeds from the poker sites. It took a lot of work. A lot of them just didn't even have it. Some of them, thought the idea was good, but put it into their development queue, and you know how that tends to go. We were not their highest priority item most of the time, and then others just didn't want to give us any data at all to start. But we chipped away at it, and eventually we had feeds from at least all the most important sites that we worked with. And we were able to start tracking data that after about 6 months, we felt comfortable we had enough data to actually launch a data oriented rankings program. And what we did at that point, interestingly enough, we really liked that there was some subjectivity to our rankings. And I think we recognize that it shouldn't just be like me or me and our team, but we created a pro poll, and there were about 150 players that were designated as pros that were allowed to vote in it, and they could change their vote each week in time for the rankings update. Like they could kind of move their rankings around. And so we used that as a part of the rankings product for quite a while, for I think it was a couple years after launching the data ranking. So we had the leaderboard that was based on points only, and then merged in with the pro poll became the actual Pocket Fives rankings. So we were able to kind of maintain a little bit of that like subjectivity, or just the idea that it's not just results, it also does matter on some level, kind of respect of your peers, or kind of like the Hall of Fame vote or whatever. And I thought that was a really good combination for a while.
So I think it was like '06, '07 was when I was big into on the full tilt anyway. For whatever reason I didn't like the Poker Stars. Full tilt was, I don't know if it was their marketing or just their platform. I never thought to look for something like a Pocket Fives. My bookkeeping on players is if somebody like sucked out on the river, I would right click, add a red flag to their username and put "I hate this person." And that's the extent of my tracking. I think I remember like doing that. Like you just right click, you choose a color, and then you put like a little note on there. And so every time I
That's
got,
hysterical.
yeah, that was my tracking. So no, I'm going back to like all those memories of pre Black Friday, RIP. But so I believe you
Yep.
said this launched in, was it '06, the very first version of it? Is that right?
Beginning of '05.
Okay, so '05 we launch. You're getting all this extra information from people wanting to share, like, hey, like add this or look at this person, but then you add the self voting option to essentially create a general consensus from these top pros. How long after the early '05 launch did that like plan of, okay, this is working, people are interested, they're using it, did it take before you either shifted gears with that platform or shifted gears outside of that platform?
Yeah, no, so it's a fascinating time in my own life, just personally looking back, because I was looking for jobs. I was running out of money personally. I had a little bit of a reservoir after I dropped out, but it did not last long. And so I was on the third round of interviews with Accenture. I think I had my second interview the day before we launched the site. And all I talked about the whole interview was our ranking system we were building, which I'm sure they loved. But I never got a call back for the third interview, and just thinking how that might have gone differently had I gotten that job, I probably would have moved out of Nashville and become a consultant slave. No offense to consultants out there, but the weekly, like being out of town all week, staying in bland hotels, George Clooney up in the air, that life might have been mine. And instead, we launched the site, and when I didn't get that call back, I just decided, I'm going to put the job hunt on ice for a little bit and focus heavily on this, because I think we've got something here, and people are pretty into what we're doing. We had quite a bit of traffic from day one, and our forums were getting action. We had built a homemade forum software, and people were on there and were chatting, and mostly it was people talking about the rankings, but it was other stuff too, just talking about poker strategy and asking like, does anyone know who this guy is on Poker Stars? Or it was all the kind of stuff that we were trying to facilitate was happening. And we didn't know anything about being an affiliate at the time. We had created accounts because that seemed like the way that we could monetize if we weren't able to sell advertisements or whatever. But we put up some pretty basic affiliate stuff on the site, and we put up a post in the forum that said how you can help Pocket Fives. It just said, if you like this site and want to help us out, just consider clicking through our links when you want to sign up for a new poker account, and that will help us keep the site alive and make enough money to be able to focus our time on this. And within a couple months, I think so. We launched mid-January. I think in February we made $1,000, and we were all like, "Wow, that's pretty good." Like, we just made $1,000. In March we made like $5,000, and I think in April we made 18. And then we were just like, "Okay, this is our job now." So, I mean, in retrospect, that doesn't seem like that much money, but I think just like the growth trajectory was pretty clear right away. And for me at the time, I mean, to make anywhere near that, even if it was only, a third of it or whatever was mine, was very attractive compared to even like the kind of jobs I was looking at out there. So it's like all of a sudden, okay, I'm gonna make some money off this. Like we're gonna be able to pay ourselves in pretty short order. And by the end of year one, we were making six figures monthly. And so we I think we just realized pretty quickly, like, wow, we've really got something here. So we leaned heavily into the affiliate stuff. We didn't know a lot about, like, I wish I'd known about SEO at the time. I wish I had thought more deeply about rakeback, which was a big thing in poker at the time, because we didn't pour resources into either of those things in our first couple of years, and probably could have made a multiple of what we did had we known that stuff. But I think just through the sort of virality of the community and the rankings, we just grew very, very quickly for those whole first 2 years, and really didn't run into any roadblocks that I'd consider substantial until the U.I.G.H passed, which was, late '06, almost 2 years into us running the site. And this actually just came up on Twitter recently. You probably know Taylor KB. He was at the same party we were at in Vegas. He's the CEO of Established the Run, but he ran something called Card Runners before and was a great high stakes poker player as well. But Taylor and I were both down in Aruba in late 2006 for that same trip I'd initially gone to 2 years earlier. And we were on the same flight flying to Charlotte on our way back to the US. And it was, I think, end of September. I want to say September 30th, but around that time, 2006, we got on the flight and everyone had been talking about the U.I.G.H because it was kind of like a very tense period, but it hadn't passed. And I'd been assured by my PR guy before leaving Aruba that it was dead. And then we land, and I have like 10 voicemails when we land in Charlotte. It's before we had internet on our phones on the planes or whatever. And it's just like somehow Bill Frist got this thing on, and it's gonna pass. It's a done deal. And I remember sitting with Taylor in the airport in Charlotte, like, oh shit, like, what are we gonna do now? And sure enough, that really appended our business model. I think like we could have probably done fine for the next 5 years until Black Friday, but my partners and I became very nervous. We weren't the kind of people that were like, we're okay with a 2% chance we go to jail or something like that. I think that we just didn't have a good sense and weren't able to get a good sense of the legality of what we were doing and the risk. We'd talk to lawyers, and lawyers would kind of tell us, well, there is some chance this could happen or this could happen. And we just didn't have the tools to evaluate what the risk situation was, and any risk seemed like too much. So we just started looking for a buyer, and we found one pretty soon after. About 6 months later, we sold to a company based in Costa Rica, and that was kind of the end of chapter one, I guess.
So this end of chapter one, the selling of the assets to Pocket Fives, were you and your three headed monster of Cal, and I forgot the name of your
Riley, yeah.
Riley, uh, were you guys, whether it was while you're actively looking for acquiring individuals, or even before that phase, as soon as you got off the plane, was your brain starting to go, okay, A, we don't want to go to jail. We need to get rid of this because it's still there's a high value asset here. And then B, if somebody does buy it, like what the heck are we doing next? So did
Yeah.
did chapter two, like how early on into the you getting off this flight, like, oh crap, did chapter two, or what could chapter two look like, start kind of going through the wheels?
That was when things got really interesting because I would say for all three of us, it looked pretty different. Cal was already very interested in fantasy sports at this time. And for those who don't know Cal or don't know of Cal, he ended up founding Roto Grinders a few years after this that ended up becoming a very, very successful. Actually, Cal and Riley together founded Roto Grinders, and became a very successful DFS community that was similar in a lot of ways to Pocket Fives, although they also incorporated premium products. But yeah, he was already thinking about doing another business in the fantasy sports space at the time, and tried one or two others before they landed on Roto Grinders. So he was already kind of going down that path. And then Riley actually was looking to get out of the business altogether, although he ended up coming back and working on Roto Grinders. Riley actually went and taught Latin at an all-girls private school for a little bit in Nashville, which is a very different, than anything we'd been doing. Riley, by the way, is like the smartest person I know. He speaks a bunch of languages, and is just good at everything, kind of. He's one of those guys. But so I was probably the one that was out of the three of us the most. I didn't really have a thought about where I was going after this. I was really still enjoying what I was doing with Pocket Fives a lot and didn't want to be done with it. And so in 2007, we sold to this company based in Costa Rica, and they were Americans that had another affiliate site called Poker Source Online that signed up players and sent them free books in the mail or free poker chip sets. So basically, it was a third party rewards site where if you sign up for a site through us, you get this reward. And they were highly successful. They had done, I think, close to 10 million in gross revenue the year before they bought us. They'd also acquired some rakeback sites and some other affiliate sites, and they had set up shop in Costa Rica to kind of make that their M&A hub where they, could get some tax setups that allowed it, that gave them some advantages to do mergers and acquisitions. And they made us an offer that ended up making sense for us. And Cal and I both moved down there, and Cal stayed about a year and a half, and he was kind of working on some other projects while there too, including his first DFS thing. Um, I just got very immersed in the business down there. I ended up becoming a partner in the company that bought us, and eventually became their CEO. And I also met my wife, my future wife, down there. We got married around the end of the time that I was living there. So I ended up staying about 4.5 years. And I got married, for anyone that knows Black Friday, which you mentioned earlier. So I got married on February 26, 2011. Black Friday was April 15th, 2011. So I'd been married about 6 weeks when like my world again turned on its head, but much worse this time, I would say, just in terms of, I mean, we probably had like $1 million in receivables that we just had to just write off instantly when that happened. And that was, that was the least of it. It was all the future revenue that we lost going forward, just kind of based on that whole era of online poker ending. And that was when I realized I just, I got to get out of here and move back to the States and kind of get my life moving in the next direction. So I kind of put off making a decision about doing anything different for a few years. And I think just being down there was something different. It was something interesting, and I learned a lot and worked a lot. But after Black Friday was when it really hit home for me. Like I've got to like make the next plan and do the next thing.
So I know you said you became the CEO of the company that acquired you in Costa Rica. So once this Black Friday happens, does the company like just dissolve over the next like few months, or is it something where it's still okay? You guys, I don't want to be the CEO anymore. Somebody else is going to be appointed that title. I'm going to go back to the States and figure out
Yeah.
things.
But believe it or not, it still exists today, in much smaller form, and I believe it's owned by one individual at this point who was not. I mean, he worked with us back then, but was not one of the main owners at the time. Um, the main principles of the company, including myself, um, none of us really wanted to be working on it anymore. I think I was willing to spend a few hours a week on it, but I did not want to be doing it full time or like living down there, going into the office. And I made that clear to our other shareholders. Um, And so there was kind of a period, there was an interim period with it where we were trying to figure out how it was all going to work. But also, the business was a shell of itself. It had been doing millions in revenue, and all of a sudden it was doing a much smaller amount. And so, what it ended up being was we got, some employees that were willing to stick around. It became a small team, and they ran it for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after Black Friday, where it was still putting off a few $100,000 a year in dividends, we'll say. And then around 2018, I want to say it was when PASPA went down, and I already had started my next business and was applying for a bunch of sports betting affiliate licenses in the US and Pennsylvania. I don't know if you ever, Travis, applied for
Oh
an
yeah,
affiliate license,
yeah.
but Pennsylvania is like just full cavity. I mean, it's like it is not a fun process to go through. New Jersey was like nothing. Pennsylvania was making me nervous, and you just have to answer a lot of questions and certify a lot of things. And I felt uncomfortable that I still had this offshore money coming in via this company that I was a passive shareholder at that point, but it was still offshore money. And I just decided to divest. And it turned out that most of the partners wanted to divest. So we were able to work something out where one guy basically bought everybody else out. And so I ended that chapter, fully at that point, although it was mostly ended 5 years earlier. But yeah, 2018, I got all the way out of that one. And one guy maintained ownership of that business, but then he died about 2 years ago. And the guy, a longtime employee who'd been running it, basically running it full time forever, got given the business, which I thought was a pretty cool, ending to all that. And as far as I know, he still runs it today.
So there was that gap, you said. So the Black Friday happens. Okay, I moved back to the States. I got to figure out the next period of my life. You mentioned, I think right before 2018, you were kind of creating something that would be in the affiliate space.
Yeah.
How far from Black Friday to you creating this first initial sports betting affiliate? What was the time frame between there? Did you take like a lot of time off while you're because you're still trying to figure out like what do we do with this Costa Rica company? Like this is
Yeah.
this is a big problem. How long did that period last before you're like, okay, here's next step?
Longer than I would have liked. I would say it was north of 5 years before I really got all in on a next thing. When I moved back to the States, which was mid 2011, and remember I was newlywed at the time, we just gotten Pocket Fives back. The buyers were not able to continue to make the payments. They still owed us some money on it and weren't able to pay anymore. So we now, Cal, Riley, and I owned Pocket Fives again, and they had already started Roto Grinders at the time as well. So they didn't really have time to do it. And I did probably most of the day to day on it for a couple of years. I was also still doing some part-time work for the other company. And around around 2013 or 14, I made a decision that I wanted to just, start a new venture, figure out some next step and not be focused on all this anymore. And I actually went down a couple paths outside the industry briefly, nothing of note, nothing that actually got to like a launch. But around early 2016, I had been paying a lot of attention to the websites that were being run at the time by Chris Grove and some other people, including Online Poker Report, and later they started Legal Sports Report. And I was very interested in what they were doing. I was finding the content, something I wanted to read pretty regularly. I was also very interested in the Twitter commentary that was going on with a lot of kind of industry experts or just people that like to be chatting about what was going on in the industry. It was pretty much a daily exercise of people commenting on. A lot of it was about DFS because that was a really interesting topic at the time. I found myself in the middle of a lot of those conversations and wanting to be more involved. And I decided to create a competitor to what those guys were doing. They had Play NJ and Legal Sports Report and all those sites, and we launched a site. My partner Bill Grinstead and I launched a site in December 2016 called njonlinegambling.com. And the idea of the site was just to cover the New Jersey online casino industry with some, at the time, I would say decent at best content. We wanted to do better, but we didn't really have the budget to really hire in professional journalists or whatever. So it was mostly freelance content at the time. And over the next year or so, we built a little bit more of a team, got some revenue coming in, got revenue positive within a year of launching that, and started seeing some real traction. And then, we get into 2018, the site's been live for a bit over a year, and PASPA goes down. And we had by that time bought some other domains and launched a couple more sites, and we felt we were really well positioned to do well in this new era. And we actually merged, I guess one way, it was a complicated deal, but we ended up a part of Roto Grinders by middle of 2018. And we started partnering with those guys for a lot of what we were doing. And we bought the site Sports Handle, which was a lot more like Legal Sports Report. It was another like very serious industry reporting site that was run by Brett Smiley. And we bought that in, I think, November of 2018, and started to just build a real serious network of news reporting sites in the gambling space, with an affiliate monetization scheme set up behind the media parts of it. And it did really well. It was very successful for us. We had quite a bit of revenue. Um, and I still had Pocket Fives at the time too, so I was still doing some work on that as well. And then in 2019, middle of 2019, we got acquired by Better Collective, all of it, Roto Grinders, Pocket Fives, um, the sports betting and casino network that we were running. And that kind of ended, I guess, that chapter. We were still there for another 2.5 years for our earnout. And then I briefly was working full time with them afterwards for, I think it was about a year and a half. I stayed on after the end of the earnout, until I left in 2023. And that brings us almost to today.
So one of the things that you were mentioning a short while ago is about the vendor licensing or the affiliate licensing, and I don't, I mean, it's frustrating for both of us because Pennsylvania is a psychopath, but I like that
Yes.
somebody else, like, yes, that's exactly the experience that I had. I can create an entity. I can get a New Jersey license collectively from me searching for domains on GoDaddy to finished a stamp of approval from New Jersey. I think in like a 60-minute time frame, and then
Yeah, yeah,
Pennsylvania
yeah.
ships me a 50-page document. They're like, it costs $5,000. We're like, wait.
And that doesn't even mention that you're like you got to go to a police station and do fingerprints, and I
Yes.
mean it's
Uh,
insanity. Yeah.
but I think the reason why so many of us did that was A, because it was just a legal state in general, but I think it because it was one of the earlier legal states. Like, oh, we have to have New Jersey, we have to have Pennsylvania, we have to have all these things. I don't know if you have ever looked into getting an I don't know, like a license to allow you to do like online casino like through these states. But I had an idea last year. I go, you know what? Before I even think about this idea, let me see what the cost would be of getting licenses in all these states to run an online casino app. And this state makes sense. This state makes sense. And then I get to Pennsylvania, which I already know from the vendor licensing are psychopaths. They're like,
Yeah.
okay, so it's a $5 million like
Oh,
application fee, and I
oh, to
go,
be like a,
what?
yeah, like an
And yeah, the
ancillary
casino
license
ancillary
or
license,
whatever.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I've never gone that path. I know, I mean, once we were a Better Collective, they had this whole, legal team and licensing department, and they handled most of that. But I can tell you what we did with Third Planet, my current company, is we are licensed everywhere, but we did it at fairly minimal cost to ourselves. We work with a company called IC360. You're probably
yeah.
familiar with them. They're excellent. Their CEO lives near me, is a friend of mine, and I was really grateful that I met him and ended up working with them because they made it easy for me. It's still a lot of work. You still got to gather a lot of documents. You still got to do fingerprints and all that. But the great thing was that they just walked me through it all. I didn't have to
Yeah.
figure out what I needed to do. I just needed to do the things they told me, and that made it a whole lot easier. So that I don't think existed in 2018. I don't think that was an option for me at the time, but I was grateful down the road that someone out there was willing to just make it all easier for me. But we still probably spent, I mean, with our current company, upwards of 50 grand to get all those licenses. There's just kind of no way around it if you want to
Right.
work with regulated. You could be a sub affiliate, I guess, but that's tricky too, depending on what state you're working in.
Yeah. So I believe you said after the roto grinders and that collective package, the earnout, you staying on for a little bit, you are
Yeah.
officially no longer part of the organization as of 2023. Is that right?
Yeah, I think August of 23 is when I left Better Collective.
Now, knowing that you had this period of time where you stay on and then eventually you're not going to be on anymore, did you start already kind of brainstorming of, okay, what does post earnout look like? What am I doing? What am I working on? Because I know you mentioned Third Planet. How early or how late after that did that become something that you wanted to do?
Well, I had certain clauses in my contract that didn't allow me to immediately start working on any new projects. So I had to leave and take a little bit of time off. And it was interesting timing for me because we had just moved to Florida. I think we moved at end of May, and then I left Better Collective at end of August of that same year. And I was getting to know the new place I lived. I live in a city called Weston, which is pretty close to Fort Lauderdale. And I had connected previously with a guy named Matt Primo, who is the president, or I believe he's president of Hard Rock Digital. He's one of like the top executives there. And he lives about 5 minutes from me, and we'd become friendly. And he hit me up in mid to late 2023 and asked if I'd have any, ability to do consulting while I was on my non-compete. And I said, probably depending on what I'm doing, I might be able to. And we ended up working out a deal where I would help Hard Rock with some of their digital growth plans. And so I came on with them in January of last year. And I'm still doing that to this day. I've been just doing some consulting work with them on the side, along with my business. And that's turned out to be a really, really great thing for me. It was not something that was really in the plans for me ever to do consulting, but the team over there is very entrepreneurial. It's a very hustle culture type company. And I've really enjoyed the people I've met there and the work that I've gotten to do with them. And so that's been great. And then on top of that, yeah, once my non-compete was up, Cal and I started talking about some new business ideas, and we landed on what we ended up doing with Third Planet. At first, it was just going to be a lottery site. We'd kind of like thought through um, just verticals that we thought could use better coverage than they have today, and lottery seemed like a good one. The big issue with it is that it's not entirely clear how to monetize that, so that was a little bit of a tricky side of that one. But we also really wanted to do something in the casino space again, and we launched the site casinoreports.com not too long after my non-compete was out, and that just became kind of like what we were doing with Sports Handler US Bets with the previous company, but really focusing on the casino industry and just doing the best coverage we can from the most neutral perspectives that we can find to bring people information that they wouldn't otherwise get about the casino industry. And then the opportunity popped up earlier this year to launch a new site in the sports space, and we launched a site ingame.com. That's only been live since April of this year. We're in December now, so Ingame's about almost 8 months old, and it quickly became a prediction market site, which was not really the plan going in, but it just means just because all the news has been in prediction markets this year, we started covering that topic extremely in depth, and we've had really, really good response to that site to the point that it's probably become our kind of top of the line product that we promote most to the world now. The site, for being as young as it is, has quite a bit of traffic and readership, and I think it's taken as a very serious source in the industry. It's something we're really proud of. And so that's really what we're doing today. We're mostly just trying to cover the news of the industry, trying to be a source that people take seriously and believe what they hear from, and I think that sources believe they'll be treated fairly by. That's not going to take a point of view that's particularly unfair to anybody in the space. That's what we're trying to do, and I think that given that most of the other big news sites that cover the space have been acquired by big affiliates, it's just harder to find these days this kind of coverage. So I think we've found an area where we can really give value to the industry, and that's what we're trying to do.
So I know when you were originally talking about the Vanderbilt inception idea of pocket fives back in the day, one of the things you said on this, I don't even know, 20 minutes ago was, I wish I would have known about SEO back then. Now that we fast forward to 2025, which is pretty much 20 years after that, and you're doing things that are heavy dependent on search queries and keywords, has that been something that because you learned from early stages pocket fives, you're like, I'm gonna SEO the crap out of this site now?
Yeah, I mean that's like that's something that we've been heavily focused on for both this and the previous business. Once we understood that the amount of traffic that you could get by doing SEO properly and especially keying in on search terms that actually generate like user acquisition for your partners. We just it's a completely different scale than any other way that I'd done affiliate marketing before. So I knew it was going to be a key, and I poured myself back in 2016 into really understanding it better. I'm not a technical SEO. I'm not one of these guys that's in the code, like figuring out all the best ways to build a site, but I do have a deep understanding at this point of the fundamentals of SEO, and it's what I'm paying attention to all the time, like the authoritativeness of your site, the quality of your content, those kinds of things are what I'm very heavily focused on. And I think part of the reason in-game has done so well so far is because we are just highly, highly topical on prediction markets and Google and other search engines as it is the way things are changing these days are understanding our site to be a good authority to use when they're trying to understand this topic better and are placing us in search results and in AI snippets and so on as a result. So, it's mostly the same rules as always. You try to be as authoritative as you can, produce the best content as you can, and get other publications to cite your work. And yeah, that's a huge focus of mine.
So pretty much everything that you've covered, going back to the Pocket Fives, you've always been something along the lines of an information authority. Where do you think that stems from? Because I mean, I know at the beginning you were specifically interested in gaming and the creation of coding and all of the things that you originally went to Vanderbilt for. But where do you think this passion for, I want to create a just platforms, I guess, multiple platforms for people to be able to get information that they're lacking from any other source, or the fact that there are no other sources?
I think part of it was just that first time we did it, it was such a high, it was such a rush for me. Plug your podcast name, right? But it was such a rush to create something and see other people's eyes light up at sort of the value it had created for them. We had a party in 2005 at the World Series of Poker at the Imperial Palace, which no longer exists, in this, room with no windows, and we had no idea if a lot of people were going to come or not, and it was just the room was just full wall to wall with people who we'd only been live for 5 or 6 months at the time, and just these people just loved the site and loved the concept of the site, loved being a part of it, felt like they were connected to it in a way that I think we had never really expected or known was going to happen. And it just made me realize, like, we have created something that is really bringing a lot of value to these people, and I'm addicted to that. I want to create more things that people find indispensable in their lives. And that's really what we're trying to do with Casino Reports and in-game, very, very much, is create sites that people find indispensable, that, like, when you're checking your morning news, if this industry is what you follow, we're essential reading for you. That's what we want to be. And yeah, it's not exactly what I studied. I think the main reason I became an entrepreneur is because I watched my dad work as a lawyer for 20 years at a firm that he moved to West Virginia, which is where I grew up. He's a Jewish guy from New York and ended up living in West Virginia, raising his kids there, my mom and dad, because of this job. And then after 20 years, they got a new CEO and just unceremoniously fired basically everybody at all high up in the company. And I think I just realized that you're always dispensable when you work for a company. You're always just, maybe they want someone else instead of you, or you're too expensive or whatever, and your job is never secure. And the whole concept of job security is just kind of bullshit. And so I just I never wanted to work for anybody. I never, even just in the brief time I worked for Better Collective, I mean, it was a good company to work for, and they were taking good care of me and everything, but I just didn't like, being somewhere down the chain of command. I wanted to be running my own thing or be one of the people making key decisions and be allowed to kind of do what I think is the right thing to do without having to go through other people. And that has been a real driving force for me in my entrepreneurship journey.
Well, that definitely makes sense, and we've kind of caught up to, well, we not kind of, we have caught up to now, 2025. How I like to wrap these episodes is to kind of now think about the entire last 45 minutes of going through your story from going in high school computers engineer to Vanderbilt to now today. If you were to find one individual event, something that we refer to mostly as butterfly effects, whether they were inside of your control or whether it was outside of your control, but a butterfly effect that happened that brought you to where you are today, what is that one key life event that you can attribute to all your success and where you are?
I definitely think when Vanderbilt decided to revoke my scholarship for that second year, for my master's program, that was probably the single biggest one. And it's kind of a funny story, at least in retrospect. It wasn't funny for me at the time at all, but I was down in Tunica, Mississippi, just like, fucking around, playing poker, gambling, whatever. And I hope it's okay to say these words on your podcast,
It's
by the
too
way.
late now,
But
Adam.
but I was down in Tunica, Mississippi, which at the time there weren't that many places to gamble in the US. And Tunica was a fun one always for us. We lived about 3.5 hours away in Nashville. And I was driving back. I was by myself down there, and it was raining heavily, and I got into a wreck and totaled my car. This is middle of 2020, 2004, and it was a bad night. It was, pouring rain. I'm crashing the median. I didn't get hurt or anything, but my friends drove out. Cal and Riley actually, and another guy, Dan Cypra, who was a good friend of ours, drove out 100 miles to pick me up out there because I didn't want to get in a tow truck, and they drove me home. And I never, the car was gone, and so on and so forth. And I get home and I check my email because we didn't have, internet phones at the time, and I had an email from the scholarship office at Vanderbilt that I, didn't have a scholarship for year two. And I think this was July. So I'm a month out from school starting again. And they're just like, yeah, you don't have a scholarship. Like, you got to pay for school this year. And I just kind of wrote back. I was like, well, I'm not coming back. And it was such a big moment. It weighed so heavy for me at the time. It was so appending to my plans and kind of the life I thought I had ahead of me. And I definitely spent the next few months while we were building our business. I also was very just kind of, I don't know, depressed or down about where things were going. I was kind of catching heat from some people in my family because I have this very academic family. Everyone's got advanced degrees and, went to multiple Ivy League schools and whatever. And I seemed like I was a screw up or something at the time. Like, I think, like, in some people's eyes. And so I was feeling a lot of pressure, but not a lot of motivation. But through that process, I discovered the ability to create something rather than to look for someone to hire me, and ended up doing something really cool and unique, and that's given me great stories. And I think that I've, now that I have my own kids, I've been able to, I think, set a real example for them of like the many different ways that you can take your life if you want to. And so I think, yeah, had I continued and finished school, things would have gone in a totally different direction.
Did I hear you correct when you say the same day that you totaled your car, you got that Vanderbilt email?
Yes. I mean, it was like it might have happened at the same moment for all I know.
Oh man, that's yeah, that's quite the rough day. But I mean, so out of it, not that I want people to have bad experiences, but I'm doing this show now. I believe we're in the late 20s of our episodes. I find it so interesting when I ask that question. I always kind of ask that butterfly effect question, and it's like half the people like because I had a kid and then this things like these great life experiences. But it's always interesting to hear stuff like this where it's like this horrendous life experience and the whole what's the cliche taking lemons and turning into lemonade you literally did that. Okay, so I'm now going to uh, reprioritize my life. What am I going to do here? It's not going to be Vanderbilt anymore, and then kind of using it as a springboard to create all the stuff you created after that. So it's always interesting to hear both sides of the coin. But Adam, again, I'm incredibly grateful for you jumping on the show, sharing your story with us. If you guys want to reach out to Adam on LinkedIn, that's why I have his name right into his face here on screen. If you're not watching this on screen, go ahead to YouTube channel, pull it up there. It's You don't really need to because it's Adam Small. It's relatively easy to spell. It's nothing that's too difficult. But again, appreciate your time. If you guys want to tune in to any other episodes for the future or the past ones, simply subscribe to the network you're watching or listening to this on. Yeah, thanks for being here, Adam, and sharing with us.
Thank you. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, we'll see you guys in the next episode.